Today we are going to talk about some general test taking strategies. These are things that you can do before a test, during a test. These could apply to state testing, so like the iLearn testing that we take, NWEA testing that we take, or this can apply to just any test, whether it's in math, reading, science, social studies, writing, English, whatever it is. These are good strategies, things to know. So, first off, why do we take tests? I know tests don't excite very many people. They can be sources of anxiety and stress sometimes, but there are reasons that we take tests, and there are kind of two main reasons. One is to find out what you already know, and second, it's to find out what you still need to learn. And some of those tests are things that we take across the country. So, like NWEA is a test that kids all across the country take. iLearn is a test that kids all across the state of Indiana take. And even if other states don't take the iLearn test, most states take some sort of standardized testing, like our iLearn test that we're getting ready to take. And some people in different areas might learn things at different times. So, for example, one group of kids might be learning long division at the same time that another group of kids is learning fractions. And that's why sometimes you may see questions that you've never learned before. And we've talked about this when we take NWEA. And that's okay if you come across something that we haven't talked about. Like we said, this is iLearn test especially is a test about all the things that you've learned in fifth grade, and we're not done with fifth grade yet. So, and it's okay if you don't know the answer to every question. Really, what we're asking for you to do is just to try your best. So again, getting every answer right, trying your hardest. I'm always going to choose making sure that you're trying your hardest. Okay. It's just doing your best. That's all that we ask of you, and that's really what the test is looking for. Is just for you to try your best to see what you know. So there are some tips and tricks to help you do better on tests, and some of them you're going to be like, yeah, I already knew that, and some of them might not seem directly related to the test, but they 100% are, especially when we're talking about standardized tests like iLearn. So, being physically ready, you're thinking, Mrs. Gard, this isn't a gym test, right? This is a test for our brains, but getting your entire body ready to test is one way that you can prepare. So let's take our twins, Mia and Alicia, for example, and they're going to take a test. They both studied for it, and they both usually get the same grades. The night before the test, though, Mia went to bed early to get plenty of sleep. Alicia, not so much. She stayed up playing video games, watching movies, watching YouTube. As you can tell, she looks a little bit tired. The morning of the test, Mia ate a healthy breakfast. Alicia didn't wake up in time because she was up so late, so she didn't eat breakfast. So she's coming to school a little hungry. Mia made sure to dress in comfortable clothes, warm clothes, since it was cold out. We know our classroom right now is a little bit warm, so clothes that would be comfortable enough in a warmer classroom. Alicia didn't have time, she, like I said, she slept in, she didn't get a whole lot of sleep, so she didn't wear the most comfortable thing. She even accidentally grabbed her shoes that were a little bit too tight, so she's a little bit uncomfortable today. So who do you think did better on the test? Yeah, of course Mia did, right? She did better even though they studied the most. And why do you think she did? It's because she was physically ready, right? Her body was ready to do its best. And when your body is in good shape and ready to do its best, your brain can do the same thing. So, making sure that you are getting enough sleep, that you're eating breakfast, whether that's at home or at school, you're dressing comfortably before you come and take our iLearn test next week, are all things that are going to help you. So, like we said, eating a healthy breakfast, wearing comfortable clothes, getting plenty of sleep, eating a candy bar for breakfast, not so much. Staying up late, not so much. And we know that some of us love to do those things, but those are definitely not going to help your brain on the day of. Another tip is to practice crossing out answers, and we've talked about this one a ton. When there are lots of possible answers, crossing out the things that you know aren't right. So, for example, what's an antonym for quiet? We know antonym means the opposite. Silent means the same thing, and purple has nothing to do with it. So we can cross that out, right? And we can start what's the word? Man, I'm struggling. To break down, to decide what we want, we have fewer choices. and it'll be easier to answer. Now, from going from 4 choices to 2 choices makes it a little bit easier. Sometimes questions will have silly answers that you can cross off right away. I hope that if you ever see the answer a gazillion on a math test, you know we can cross that one out, right? That doesn't make much sense. So a lot of the times we'll find things that are kind of silly, and we can go ahead and cross those off and get that out of our brain. For example, what is the synonym for sad? Do we see an answer on here that's completely silly, that doesn't make any sense? Yeah, superfragilistic expialidocious, although fun to say, is pretty silly. We know 100% right off the bat we can cross that one out. Um, and for example here, I know it's not bashful because that means shy. That doesn't match up with sad. So that's another way, kind of using context, using our background knowledge to check off other answers as well. So that it takes us down to only 2 options. So it just brings down the amount of options that we have, which is good. Click on the girl to see how she decides which answer to choose. So the question is, who was Little Red Riding Hood going to visit? So she thinks, first I'll cross off the Little Mermaid. That's just silly. She wasn't even in the story. Next I'll cross off the wolf. I know this wasn't the wolf because why would she want to go visit him? This must mean it's either her aunt or her grandmother. I think it's her grandmother, but I'll check back in the text to make sure. And we've talked about Little Red Riding a couple of times this year, so we know it would have been her grandmother. But that's just kind of the thought process that I would imagine several of you guys go through as well. Another tip is to skip a question and come back to it. And again, you've probably heard this before, but here is our example. We've got Ashton and Marcus. They're taking a math test, and the first question was super hard. Neither of them had ever seen a question like it before. Ashton decided to skip the question and come back. He made a little mark to remember he needed to come back to it. And when we did our practice I Learn test, we knew how to mark those questions to come back to. Marcus wanted to answer all his questions in order, and he wanted to get them all correct, so he stayed on the first question. He took up the entire test time trying to answer it and ended up not being able to answer any of the other questions. Ashton, on the other hand, answered all the other questions on the test that were much easier, and then he remembered to come back and try the first one again and just made his best guess. So Ashton ended up getting the first one wrong, and Marcus got it right, but who do you think made the better decision? Yeah, Ashton. He chose to skip that one, and he got all of the rest of the 7 correct, whereas Marcus got the first one, but he took his entire time and missed out on answering all of the easier questions. So skipping one that's a little bit more difficult and going to the ones that you know firsthand. Like I said on that practice I Learn test that we did, we know that we could mark question 1 and then come back to it in the same section before we were to move on. The nice thing about I Learn is that it's not a timed test, but on top of this, not just the time that it takes, but sometimes when we're working on a question that's really hard, we get really frustrated, and then that sets the tone for the rest of the test to be a little more frustrated. Sorry, you can hear Murray in the background. He was getting frustrated. He's a little frustrated. He must be working on a tough question. But anyway, so skipping and coming back is always a good strategy. So, for example, if you were to see a problem that's really hard, that you know will take a long time, try circling that question. Or like we said, with Canvas, you can always mark a question, or on the I Learn test, you can mark a question, and you can come back later and do some of the easier ones. So 15,975 divided by 25 is by far the hardest question that's on this page. So it would make sense to do the other 3 that are much easier first and then come back to number 1. And then once you finish that, like I said, you come back to it. Finally, the last one is to leave no blanks. So you don't want to leave any question unanswered, even if it seems like a really difficult question. So it's okay to skip it and come back to it, but we don't want to just not make a guess, especially when it's a multiple choice question, because we've got lots of options. We're not having to come up with it on just, off the top of our head. So not leaving any blanks. So let's say, here's an example. Let's say you're on a game show and one of the colors is the winning color, but you have no idea what color it is. They give you no other instructions except you need to choose the right color. But if you choose the right color, you win $1 million. Pretty enticing, right? But if you don't choose the right color, nothing bad will happen. You just don't win the $1,000,000. Should you choose a color just because you aren't sure which one is the winning color, or should you just not choose one? Of course, you should try, right? You don't have the best odds of winning, but you might. And there's no consequence for choosing the wrong answer. It's the same thing on the test. You will get the same points for not answering a question as you do for answering the question and getting it wrong. So it's silly not to go ahead and at least try. So just for fun, just a second, pick what color you think might be the winning color. Ready for me to show you which one is the winning color? See if you win $1,000,000. You should have chosen yellow. If you did, great. Oh, and by the way, I don't have $1,000,000, guys. Sorry. But you would have, so congratulations for that. If you didn't choose any of the other colors, guess what? You're in the exact same boat as my yellow people. So, um, just as kind of a silly example, right? It's the same idea on a test, but you've tried your best and you still don't know the answer. Always make a guess. Never leave it blank. If you leave it blank, you'll definitely get it wrong. But if you at least make a guess, you always have the option to get it right. You never know. So let's review some of these general test taking skills. So being physically ready, meaning that you've had a good breakfast, you're well rested, you're wearing clothes that are comfortable, your body is ready to do its best, so your brain can do its best. Crossing out answers that you know are not correct. So giving yourself a leg up already. If it seems like a super silly answer, or if you 100% know that can't be the right answer, it just helps give your brain a break a little bit. You don't have to look at all the options. You only have a few options left after you cross out the ones that you know are incorrect. Skipping a problem that's going to take you a really long time or that seems really difficult, and then returning to it later. So skipping those difficult ones, going to the ones that you know the answer to or that seem a little bit easier, and then coming back and answering those. And again, making sure that you come back and answer those. Don't leave any blanks. Making sure that you're trying your hardest. Like we said, there's no penalty for answering a question and getting it wrong any more so than not answering the question. So, and if you answer the question, you always have the option to get it right. But if you don't answer the question, then there's no chance of getting the points and getting it right. So these were just some general test taking strategies. The next video, we're going to talk about some that are specific to reading. So, and then we're going to take a little quiz at the very end to see what you remember from this preparing for the test.